Alright, hello again, everybody. I'm still getting set up. Should take about another 5 minutes or so. We'll get started at 11. So, I just want you to know that I'm here. I'm ready to go. I'm just trying to make sure that I've got everything that I need available. Right. Right. Yeah, I think I got everything that I want to talk about and what I want to work on today. And got my paints ready, got brushes ready. Okay, we should be good to go. But I don't want to start too early because there are people that will be coming in and, noticing that it's close to 11 and then logging in, getting ready for the show. So I want to give them an opportunity to get on. Yeah, I've got, I'm going to continue to paint on these models. And let me go ahead and I'll leave these on just for now. Basically, I've got two sets of glasses. I've got my computer glasses, the ones I wear when I am sitting at my desk on the computer. And then I've got a slightly higher magnification for when I am painting, so I get a better picture. Right. These Prussians, man. These Prussians. I don't really have that much left to do on them, honestly. It's just the straps, and there's, well, I got a lot more than just the straps, but the straps are going to take the longest amount of time. And I'm almost to the point where I need to paint the straps. So that's going to be a long afternoon. But we're probably not going to do the straps on today's video. All right, let's just go ahead and get started. My audio should be on. You guys should be able to hear me. I'm wearing my old beanie here. Lights are on. Center screen is up. Everything looks good. Okay, so hello again, everybody. Thank you for coming out to another Wargaming and Miniature video. This is another Wargaming Weekly. Now, I recommend, or I advise that you go ahead and subscribe to the channel, but more importantly, hit the notification bell, because these Wargaming Weekly shows, they come out once a week, approximately, mostly once a week. But what I might do is change the day that they're on. The last couple of months I've been on a Wednesday, but going the next couple of months it might be on a Monday. I might be changing to Monday. I like to coordinate with my wife's schedule for her classes, and then have these shows when she's at class. That way there's no interruptions. She's currently in her sewing room, so you might hear some coughing coming from her sewing room, where she does she likes to sew garb and outfits and stuff for the SCA, which is a medieval reenactment group. So you might see her come by, walk by, or whatever. So just understand that. Okay, so on today's show, I want to talk about these Prussians that I'm working on, and I want to talk about Prussians in general, not just these Prussians, but and the troubles that I've had researching the uniform colors for these units. Okay, we're going to switch this so I can get to it easier. Got to keep my lips wet. Okay. I don't know if you guys have ever had this Monster Rehab. It's tea and lemonade. It's that Arnold Palmer or whatever you call it. It is to die for. It's good. And there's only 25 calories. Okay. Okay, so let's talk about. Let me talk a little bit about the history of Prussians with me, right? And then we'll get into the troubles that I was having. Well, this is all part of it. As you know, I've been playing Napoleonic miniature games since probably the late 80s. Okay, 85, I got out of the service the first time and started doing Napoleonics in right about that time, so about 85, 86, and I was on a budget, a very severe budget, so I decided to do Napoleonics in 1/72 plastic. And I did all the miniatures that I needed for Napoleon's battles in 1/72 for Waterloo. I ran a game at a convention, NashCon, back in 87, maybe 87, somewhere in that neighborhood. And they provided us a table that was, I think, 12 feet long, 12 feet wide, about a 6 by 12 or something like that. And it was too small, right? The battlefield was too small. 1/72, the bases were bigger than the 15 millimeter, obviously. But not as big as Black Powder and 25s, but about halfway. And it was cramped. It was cramped on the battlefield. At that point, I made a decision to switch to 15 millimeter, which is what the game called for, right? So they recommended 15s. They said you could play at any scale, just up the bases and stuff, but the game was pretty much designed for 15 millimeter on a 9-foot table. So I switched, and so I took all those painted 1/72 models, sold them over time. They sold. But then I did a big, massive purchase of 15 millimeter Napoleon's battles numbers for Waterloo. And at the time, I thought that was a lot of miniatures. Remember, I'm pretty new to the whole building an entire army concept, right? But I had bought the British, the French, and the Prussians for Waterloo. And I didn't paint the Prussians until the end because I knew there were two scenarios in Waterloo. You could play a scenario without the Prussians, with just the French and the and the Allies, uh, and then the game stops when the Prussians arrive. So you get like the first 2/3 of the battle, or you could play the full battle when the Prussians arrive. And I opted in 172nd to play just the first part. So I never really got into painting any Prussians. And then when I went to my 15s, I did the same thing. My Prussians were uh, left in the box because I pretty much painted everything for, and even so, a lot of the units weren't finished. They were just primed white, maybe red jackets, and that's it, right? And we still played with them. But eventually I got to complete them, and that was probably um, in the 90s, right? In the 90s, I had completed the my entire army fully 100% painted, but that also included the Prussians. So when I had done research to paint the Prussians, remember that, and this is where my mind is about to explode. But when I did the research to paint the Prussians, I knew that remember, I'm playing Napoleon's battles, and the Napoleon's battles, the unit that you put together is not a battalion, it's not a regiment, it's a brigade, right? And so we had line brigades, light brigades, and landwehr brigades. And the general gist of the Prussian army was what you see on the screen right here, right? The man on the right, on the picture on the screen. So gray pants, blue jackets, red collars and cuffs, white straps, and at 15 millimeter, not super hard to paint, painted thousands of them, and that was pretty much the Prussian line brigades. Maybe there was two light brigades, or maybe there was one. I don't even remember. There's Jaegers and light brigades. Those are basically Jaeger green, gray pants, Jaeger, hunter green on the top. Super easy. Landwehr, you painted your guys. They had the blue overcoats. They look just like that. And so it was not, there wasn't any, once I did the research there, it was pretty much straightforward. Just painted them all and got it all done. Okay. Then, and remember, that's by brigade. And yeah, I put a little variety, and some of the brigades would have the yellow, and some brigades would have the red or the salmon or whatever. And but I basically pulled those from the regiments. I didn't break it down and the British, I did the same thing. I did whole brigades, but I painted them as a specific regiment. So like the 9th Regiment would, with their yellow buff or whatever it is, collars and cuffs, I'd paint that. I'd use the 9th flag and everything, but it would represent a brigade on the table. So in the British, I pretty much did do them by regiments, but in the Prussian side, I pretty much did not. The regular line infantry were just blue jackets, red collars and cuffs, and gray pants, whatever, and just cranked them out. Well, and that works perfectly fine for a brigade scale game. But when you're starting to talk about a battalion scale game, right, like what's really popular right now in the world, battalion scale games are it's the standard right now. It really is. Brigade scale games are kind of phasing out. I mean, I'm sure there are still a lot of people out there playing Napoleon's battles or Grand Army or what is it, Chef de Brigade or even at Sense Resultants. Even those guys. They don't paint each individual figure a different color. They're painting them as battalions. Even though they might be representing more than that. Okay, so how do I say this? So I've never really, honestly, never really had to dig deep enough to find out what each battalion's uniforms are. Okay, so I jumped to this 25 millimeter battalion scale miniature black powder at 25-28 millimeter black powder, and I resort back, or I go back to doing what I've been doing in the past, and that is Quatre Bras, Waterloo, Allies, French. So I had Brunswickers and Dutch Belgians and Hanover, and all that, and then the French, totally ignoring the Prussians, right? Because at 28 millimeter, like this, the Prussians, for the amount of figures that I was already painting, the Prussians would have just doubled the number of figures I had to paint. And I didn't look forward to that. And I was, well, actually, that's not true. I did look forward to it, but I had a plan. Like I was going to paint my French and my British and my Allies, and I was going to paint those first. And play just the early part of Waterloo first, or Quatre Bras first. But then once I got all of that finished, then I would progress into the Prussians. Okay. So basically still in the back of my mind, I'm not really paying attention to the Prussians. Then Wargames Atlantic comes out with this reserve box set, right? And I get this reserve box set in for my store on eBay, and I also do a what's in the box video for these Prussian reserves because I'm curious. I open them up, and you can see them. These guys right here, Prussian reserves. Actually, 3 of these battalions are made up with Prussian reserve figures from one box, right? Because the box comes with 60 models. Not 30, not 24, 60. And so I put 20 of them in this battalion, 20 of them in this battalion, and 20 of them in this battalion. And then you only need 4 figures for command on each of those battalions, right? To make a 24 figure battalion. So what I did was I ordered front rank command for 3 battalions. Front rank command comes in 6-figure bags. So that saved me 2 figures here, 2 figures there, and 2 figures there. And what I did was I added them to these other battalions because these 2 battalions are Old Glory. Old Glory. They also come with something like 36 figures or something, but with those additional figures, I was able to get 5 24-figure units, which it worked out perfect, right? So basically I've got, because there's 1 Old Glory bag, 1 Wargames Atlantic box set, and then 3 front rank command elements allowed me to do this. Okay, so I'm researching, and I thought that the Prussians carried 2 flags. That's not really true. Each battalion has their own color, and then there's like a regimental headquarters that carries a flag. So technically, the battalions only carried 1 flag. See, that was something new I learned, because in my brigades, I always had 2 flags. The regimental and then just another flag, right? The Liebfahnen and the whatever the other one's called, right? So my mind broke, right? I'm like, oh, I only need 1 flag? Okay. Because I could have ordered, because I ordered 5 regiments of flags. Actually, I ordered 6, but that was a mistake. I meant to order 5. Because I thought each battalion was going to have 2. Well, I could have ordered just 3 flags and put technically you should have the battalion flag for each battalion, so I still needed the battalion flags, but the regimental flags I didn't necessarily need. But luckily, the Old Glory bag came with 4 standard bearers. So I put 2 here and 2 there, so I'm still going to use some regimental flags as well, not just battalion flags. But okay, so I broke each one of these down. They're all individually a battalion. We've got the 14th, the 18th, 22, 23, and 24. And now here comes the reason why I brought you to this point. Okay. These are all reserve units from 1813 that were elevated to line units for the 1815 campaign, right? In 1800, I just learned a ton about the Prussians that I really had not paid much attention to. I knew a little bit of this, a little bit of that. I play with another wargamer, and he is really into the Prussian, Russian, Austrian campaigns. So I picked up a lot from his games that we played over at his house. But to be honest, since it wasn't vital for me to know the history of the certain battles or whatever, I really didn't. It wasn't on the top of my mind. What was on the top of my mind was, what units do I have? Where are they deployed? What's the objectives? Straight up wargamer stuff, right? But researching these uniforms, I discovered or learned quite a bit about their uniform changes, their evolution, why they went with certain colors opposed to other colors, and that kind of stuff was never really in my mind. So 1806, the Prussians were pretty much wiped out, right? Their army was decimated. They had like 5 regiments remaining at the end of 1806, and they had to sign treaties that prevented them from forming a standing army. So they, in 1813, I do believe, they started this. I guess you would call it a reformation, but they had these provincial regiments that were being formed in every little province, like Silesia, Westphalia, Pomerania, etc., etc. And they were formed into individual battalions and regiments that they were considered, they were called reservists. And because there was no budget for them, they were given these very basic uniforms. They didn't invest in dyes or colors or anything like that. So all their fabric was just gray. So you had gray pants, gray jackets, everything was gray. But then they would attach these small little plates of fabric, felt, to the collars where, right up by the neck, identifying them as from Silesia or identifying them as from Pomerania or wherever. And then later, closer to the 1815, once after 1813, where they were pretty much free to form actual regiments, the first 12 regiments were your traditional, what you would think of as Prussian uniforms: blue jackets, gray pants, red collars and cuffs. These guys, those guys, that was the traditional uniform for the first 12 regiments. Then they would take these reserve regiments and they converted them. They said, okay, you Silesian and you Pomeranian and you Westphalian, you guys are going to form up and you're going to form the 13th regiment, or you're going to form up and form the 24th regiment. And so they took all these reservists and put them into these regiments, which in effect doubled their army size. They went from 12 regiments to 24 regiments overnight. Now here comes the problem. So the 13th to the 24th regiments were prior reservists, which still had reservist uniforms, which is the solid gray. But over time, a couple of years till Waterloo, over time, they were being issued the traditional Prussian uniform. So some regiments, some of these reservists had the new uniforms. Some of the regiments did not. Some of the regiments still had their original colors, like the regiments that were formed from like Silean and Westphalian, they each had their own provincial colors. So like one company in the battalion would still have the red, while another company in the battalion would still have yellow. And so I learned that the Prussians were not as uniform as I thought they were. There was a lot of variety, even in their battalions. Okay. At that point, I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? How am I going to do this? So I said, okay, let's take a look at what the professionals are saying, right? So I have this book from Lillian Fred Funken, right? Your Arms and Uniforms. I go to the Prussians, and they have a plate. Hang on. Okay. They have a little page right here that tells me what the regiment is from 1 to 26. Nope, I'm sorry. 1 to 60, because it continues on to the next page. And what their color is. All right? Their collars and cuffs. Salmon pink, crimson, pale ochre, lilac, saffron, so it's just super. There's crimson and black and rose pink as opposed to salmon pink, so they give me a long list of the regiments and what their colors are. But that pretty much is before 1806. Because after 1806, all of that was thrown out the window. Then I pull out this bad boy, Uniforms in Napoleonic Wars. This is a very nice book. It talks about history. It talks about the Reformation, and it even has a chapter saying before 1806 and a chapter that says after 1806. And then I look at the uniform color chart, and okay, here we are. Is this it? Yep, Prussia. Yeah, 1 through 60, and it talks about what province they're from, or what they're called. Like the 18th is called the Kings, and their facings are pink. Right? Guess what? Those guys are pink. But then it says they have white small clothes, which is the pants, basically. But then I look at the top, and it says 1806. Infantry before 1806. Dragoons before 1806. And then there's a chapter called After 1806. And I flip and I flip and I flip through the after 1806, and it does not anywhere in there give me any, like, what are the new colors. So this is a bust. Even though the before 1806 does kind of give me an idea, it's still not complete. And then I go to this little handy book by Philip Haythornthwaite. This one is probably the best book out of all of them. The art is a little lacking, but that's okay. What's more important is it gives you a breakdown of each of the plates and what's not shown. So like Prussians, like the old reserve infantry regiments were taken in on 1815, being numbered 13 to 24, the various independent legions, and then it goes all the way down in there, and then it has the regimental numbers. But the regimental numbers here, it took me a little research to figure this out, but these are the old regiment numbers, not the new regiment numbers, right? This is the regimental numbers that were taken from the units, and then they were formed into these new regiments. So each unit had like 3 regimental numbers. It had like a previous 1806 regimental number formed into these reserve regiments that were later formed into the current, which I say current when I mean 1815 regiments. And so, and then it says, by the middle of 1813, some regiments had received clothing from England. The uniforms were either British style or they were manufactured in Portugal. Okay, so this is probably the best resource for any of the colors that I'm currently painting. Okay, I get online, the website you got right in front of you on the screen, okay, is also a good resource, but here's the clincher. The website has certain colors. The first book had some are the same, some are different. So there's a little bit of a discrepancy. You look at the third book, it's got even more discrepancies. Okay, but each of those sites, like the website and the first 2 books, claim to be definitive, like this is the fact, when in fact you got 3 people saying the fact is X, Y, and Z. So who do you believe? Which reference am I going to believe? And then I get to Philip's book, and his wording is inspiring, because he says in his book there's a number of different references. They're all in conflict. They all say different things. And he says, through my research, this is what I believe to be correct, but I could be wrong, because there was such a uniform, there was no real set uniform. It was just every month, every unit was getting a different uniform. So he said this, by the time of Waterloo, because remember, this is uniforms of Waterloo. Because by the time of Waterloo, some units were in their old reserve uniforms, some units were in their new Prussian uniforms, and some were in their pre-1806 uniforms. And so he said, this is what I figured out, and basically I'm saying he was very humble about it, and he was very, he understood that that there was an issue with understanding what the Prussian uniforms were. And to me, that tells me he's probably the most accurate, because he identified the differences and explained them, where the other ones were like, nope, this is the way it is. This is the way it is. And they're different. So I don't know. Okay. now that you know, I don't think it matters. You can paint them with whatever colors you want, and you're probably right. Okay, so now what I want to start off with today is to finish some of the red turnbacks and collars and cuffs of some of these units. I'd started them last night and then kind of just stopped halfway through. So the turnbacks, the collars and cuffs and turnbacks, I'm using flat red, okay, as the base. But I'm also mixing in a little bit of this scarlet blood. Basically just to give it a little bit lighter tone. Now, I've gone through all these units and have done their colored collars and cuffs. But as you can see on this, no, you might not be able to see. Yeah, you can see it. On this regiment here, I'm going with yellow for their collars, but the command element is going to have the new Prussian uniform, right? So they're going to be with the red collars and cuffs. Yeah, I think they are finished when it comes to this. These guys are finished as well. And that's another thing, the flags, right? I ordered them November 24th, something like that. I ordered them from Flags of War, which are normally really, really good. Okay, I'm using the same mixture for the tops and bottoms of the drum as well. So mid-December, I was like, okay, I haven't got my flags yet. Normally it takes about 6 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks. And so, you know, coming from England and all that. So after 4 weeks, I said, okay, what's going on with my flags? And the website said that they were shipped and everything was good. So I'm like, okay, let's just wait a little while. And then I went back early January, right? So at that point, it's been 6 weeks. Hadn't received them. And he said that there was a postal strike, like the post office went on strike, so shipping and everything was delayed. And I was like, okay, I get it. No worries. And then he went to Christmas and said that he won't be back till the 10th. And he said he's making sure that all the orders that came in over his break, he's going to do everything in his power to make sure they get shipped out and everything. So if I don't get them this week, I'm going to write him a letter letting him know that I haven't received them and ask for maybe a tracking number or something. Or he needs to go to his post office and file a claim or something. Or I need to just wait, because maybe nothing's been stopped, it's just been delayed. I don't know. We'll figure it out. But basically, I don't have these flags yet. That's the point I'm trying to make. Okay, I must have already done the turnbacks on these guys. I just stopped when I was doing the drum. Okay. Okay, I'm going to have to do a little research real quick on this. The 23rd. Okay, the drummer does have red wings. Now, I've noticed generally the drummers are going to have the wings in the regimental color with white laces. And I use the website reference more than anything else. Just for convenience. But I also know that the website also makes mistakes just like everyone else. I mean, nobody's perfect, right? I also noticed when I was painting some of these collars and cuffs, I came across some backpacks that, because I had painted the backpacks brown, I had missed a couple of backpacks. I noticed that one of the battalions had a strip right there. Those two guys right there, missing. Their backpacks aren't painted. So I'm going to have to go back and paint those guys. I'm using a 3.0 Transon Art paintbrush. Transon is one of my favorite paintbrushes. You can get a set, 11 or 7 paintbrushes and they have like a mixture of sizes in them. And I found that they last over a year of constant use. I don't know, I would say I probably paint almost 1,000 figures a month. Maybe that's a little high. 500 figures. We'll go 500 figures. So what is that, about 6,000 miniatures a year? And these brushes hold out pretty good. I think they hold out because I'm in constant use. I guess if I let them sit on the shelf for a month, they might dry up or harden up or something. But I guess because they're in constant use, they have lasted all year. These guys have their... Oh, okay. The reserve uniforms usually don't have turnbacks. They have waistcoats, so they're short. But some of the officers are still using the Prussian uniforms, which use the long tails, and some of them have short tails. So that's just telling me there's a large variety. And it took me a couple of tries to find the right blue for these blue jackets. I tried Prussian blue, but it's okay, but it's just from Vallejo, that is. Like I said, it's okay, and it probably would work out okay, but I wound up using Ink Spot. Okay. One more drag. There we go. I wound up using Ink Spot. It's actually a really good blue color, as you can kind of see. Now, if we want to talk about ease of painting, these Old Glory miniatures, they are okay. You know, they got positives, they got negatives. The front rank miniatures are 100% the best. I guess I could have got some Perry, but I don't have any Perry in this set. And then the Wargames Atlantic. They are really easy to paint, except their backpacks. They have a lot of good detail on them, but their backpacks blend with the model, so there's no distinct backpack. It's like a very lazy sculpt, like the back and the backpack. It's all like, but everything else seems to be okay. Okay. All right. But since I'm painting the commands right now, these are all front rank. Now, I started these last Wednesday. I've been painting them all week. But I will have to admit, a lot of that time was trying to determine what colors I was going to paint them, because I ran into the uniform issue. Now, I could have just painted them all gray, you know, like your basic reserve unit. But I didn't want to be lazy. I wanted it to be right. And if not right, I wanted there to be variety. I didn't want to paint just a generic Prussian uniform. Now, before I even ordered these flags, my mind was, let's just paint generic uniforms, you know, with different collars and cuffs, and then let the customer decide what unit it was. And let the customer decide, you know, what flag he was going to use on his miniatures. But I changed my mind. Okay, another thing I noticed, 3rd battalions, none of these are going to be 3rd battalion, they're all going to be 1st battalion. But 3rd battalions have black straps. First and 2nd battalions all have white straps. Well, that's only indicated on the website. In the various books, they say that some of them say that the 2nd battalion might have black straps, the 3rd battalion might have black straps. So it just depends. Again, if you paint a battalion with black straps, it's either going to be 2nd or 3rd battalion. Do your own research and make your own call. And I think most wargamers that are sitting at the table, they're not going to care. All they want to know is, what do I need to roll? How far can they move? How far can they shoot? What's their melee potential? I understand there's some old grognards out there that, like myself, that really care about the uniform colors and they want it to be as accurate as possible. But your average everyday wargamer, he just wants it to look right. He doesn't care if it's 100% completely accurate. Like, he doesn't want to see a pink French unit running around and a white jacket Brunswicker or something, you know. But if you got a Brunswicker with a yellow collar and it was supposed to be pink, I don't think he's going to care. Personally, I wouldn't care. At the table, I don't care. If it looks good, the paint jobs look good, and they're close enough. I'm not going to sit here and shoot holes in somebody else's paint jobs. If they're not painted, or if they're like way off, then yeah. Okay. Whoop. Whoop, 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 whoop. Okay. What battalion is this? $22nd? Okay, hang on. Okay, it's going to be red. All right, then the edge of the drum. Yeah, I noticed that some write-ups, I think it was the Haythornthwaite book, said that the majority of the packs were the fur hide or whatever, a lot like French. But when the British sent the uniforms, they also sent packs, and those are in the tanned leather, black tanned leather. But the miniatures that I'm looking at on all these figures, every one of them has the fur backpack, so I just painted them all fur. I took my inspiration from the miniature itself. I was like, none of these are British backpacks, so I'm not going to paint any of them as if they were British backpacks. So I didn't really bother looking at the regiments, like which regiments had British backpacks and which ones didn't. I didn't even bother. Because the miniatures didn't have that, so. Now, if you painted some with yellow and then some with white and some with pink and some with red, and you mixed and matched them on the table, I think you'd be okay. I think it would probably be even more accurate that way. I have a feeling that the companies had their original colors, but the regiments, they were all over the place, indicating that the battalions were also all over the place. Okay, and these two figures here are front rank, and those are the two that I didn't do the backpacks. Not frustrating, but disappointing that I just glazed over it. Now there is one downside to painting the reserves in their gray uniforms. You really can't use them without acknowledging that they're proxies. You really can't use them before 1806. So if there's a battle before, and that's almost every Napoleonic army has a date where their uniforms change. The French have it, the British have it, the Prussians have it, where at a certain date the army changes their uniform. Like the British, they went from, the big change was their shako. They went from a stovepipe style shako to a Belgique style shako after the peninsula. But they also went from long tails to short tails 1812, I think. I don't remember. And the French went from their white uniforms in the early war, where they didn't have enough indigo dye, to the blue uniforms of the later periods. So even though, like when I was painting for my Waterloo, because I was painting so many blue jackets and white pants and I didn't even paint these guys' boots. What the hell is going on with me? Okay, I didn't paint their backpacks or this one guy's boots. But that's okay, because normally what I'll do is I do what's called like not a base coat, but like I guess you could call it a base coat, and then I will go back over it and fix mistakes in various places And I do that for every figure. So if I get back to this figure, I'll fix his boots. Okay, let me make sure I got these guys. Okay, yeah, they're good. Okay, so I've got everybody's turnbacks. Drum, 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 drum. Okay, this is the only drum I hadn't touched. All right. Now, everybody knows, if you've been watching my channel for a while, what is the magic number of battalions that I like to paint at one time? It's not 5. I have painted 5 battalions at once in the past. I have painted 6. I even painted 8 battalions at one time in the past. And I've painted 1 battalion at a time in the past. There is a sweet spot that allows for the best paint jobs. Does anybody know, or anybody know what my number is? Well, the answer is 4. For speed versus quality. I try to put good quality on every model, but once you get over 4 battalions, the time that it takes exceeds my patience, if that makes sense. So by painting 5 battalions, it's getting frustrating because it's already been a week and I haven't finished them. I do expect to finish them in the next day or two. I do expect that, so there is that. But when it comes to the, I dread having to do the white straps on everybody. So what I'll do to kind of break up that white strap tedium is I'll paint certain things white, like the drum cords, because I normally paint them white, and then I'll do all the drums, and then I'll be like, yeah, I got all the drums done. Then I'll go backpacks. Okay, I'll do all the backpacks. All right, nice, got all the backpacks done. And then I'll go to the chest straps, and I'll be like, oh my god, this is taking forever. Oh. Okay, so I'm just going to do a real quick glance to see if there are any other backpacks that I had missed. I don't think so. I think there was only those 2 backpacks that I had missed on this strip. And I painted them. I might have put it over there, but you? It's not mud brown. I know I didn't paint you mud brown. I painted you brown base. That's grime brown. That's all Vallejo. What the hell? Where'd my brown base go? Okay, that's not even brown. That's gray. Brown base. Here we go. AK, brown base. We'll just use 2 drops because that's probably all I need. Another good set of brushes. This is from the Artisan Shop, but I don't think that's the brand. Is it? The Artisan Shop. Okay, maybe it is. I thought I still had one unopened. I have 2 unopened. Yeah, they're the Artisan Shop. It's another brand of brush. This one's a little older, a little less fine, but that's okay because what am I painting? Backpacks. And whenever, like, I'm painting from inside out, so I don't care if I get it on their mess kit. I don't care if I get it on their bedroll, greatcoat roll, or whatever it is that's on their back, because I'm going to go back in later and paint those afterwards. I'm just getting brown on the backpacks and a little bit of other things, but I am trying to avoid their coat because I already painted that and I don't want to paint their coats. But again, I will go back over these models with a second coat, but the second coat is not really a coat. It's really just a touch-up where there might have been mistakes made. It's really all the second coat is a mistake covering, fixing pass. That only takes a few minutes, usually. Okay, we got those. We got those brown backpacks. Everything that's going to be red is red. So I can put these away. Okay, so my next color, I was thinking about painting the gaiters. Right? The gaiters, you can see like dark gray here. You can see those are actually boots. There's dark gray gaiters, and some people say that they were so dark, probably like this one, they were so dark that they were almost black. And so technically you could probably just paint the gaiters and the boots all black and you'd be fine. But that's not me. I'm a stickler. Okay, so when you're done with a palette, right, and you've used all 10 spaces, it's easy to clean because all I have to do is just peel off the aluminum foil and boom, it's clean. Now I got another palette. Easy. Okay, Necromancer's Cloak. Looking at the dried version of Necromancer's Cloak, to me that looks like gray, but it also looks very black. It looks very dark. I thought about using colors like black gray or dark gray, like that. But I can see that that looks more gray than that. This Necromancer's Cloak, it looks like a really good color. Almost black. Which I normally, when it comes to boots, I usually don't paint them black anyway. I usually paint them a dark gray because nothing is truly ever black. Same thing with the helmet covers. They're Shaco Litco. Okay, that's tomorrow. I should be getting a Litco order in tomorrow. But the, what do you call it? The Shaco covers, they're not black. They're dark gray. Nothing is ever really black. Howdy.
Hey.
Now, if I want any of this gray that's on the primer to kind of shine through, either a black or a dark gray, I mix in a little bit of this medium, which thins the paint and allows for a highlight. All right. Depending on how thick your paint is, you might add a drop of water. This looks good. Okay, so where do we want to start? We want to press everything over here, because remember, I paint from left to right. So we take one of these guys, we look at them. These three guys don't have gaiters, but this one model does. Now the other guys, they have gaiters. They're just tucked underneath their pant trouser legs, so you don't see them. Oh, this is like the perfect color. I am so glad I chose this color. It's like a super dark gray. and I thinned it enough so that you could get a little bit of a highlight bleed through. And that's pre the dry, right? So because it's going to dry darker. Most paints do dry darker. Okay, the drummer's got gators. Also, whenever I go into painting a model, something in the back of my mind is always present. I know that I'm going to be washing these models. And so I also know that the wash is going to bring everything down. It's going to darken everything up. Or dirty it up. Sometimes it makes it look a little dirty, which I love the effect that wash gives a model in regards to dirt. I think it looks good. Now, sometimes I'll go back in later and like touch up wash stains to fix them. But most of the time, the new way I do washes, I don't run into that problem anymore because I use a Liquitex thinner, basically. Okay. Yeah, so about, I don't know, I'm not going to say 50%, but there's a number of models in the Wargames Atlantic that are long pants, and a number of them are gaiters. So what does that do? That gives a variety of uniforms within the same unit, actually. You get guys with gaiters, you get guys without gaiters. Yeah, so far it's been about 50-50. Yeah, and if it's 50-50, that's perfect for me. I'm happy with that. Yep, this Necromancer cloak is great for Prussian gaiters. They'd probably be good for other nations' gaiters that use like a really dark gray / black. Actually, they would probably be really good for helmet covers as well. Because anything that calls for black, I tend to shy away from black. I do paint some things black, like the cartridge boxes. That usually winds up being black. And the actual Shako, that tends to be black as well. But like Shako covers, which is like an oil skin, I go with a dark gray. Usually. And also, sometimes I'll experiment with different colors on different units. And so you might not get exactly the same look on different units because I tried something different. Yeah, all those gators look good. Okay. The Wargames Atlantic models, they went together fairly easy when I was assembling them. The only thing you really had to assemble was their head. That was one thing, kind of like the Warlord Games models, where you get the entire model and then you just glue the head on. So they're kind of like that, except they had a few separate bed rolls that you could put on the tops of some of their backpacks, and but the majority of them have their bedrolls slung around their bodies. So you only had to do about half of them, maybe not even half of them, under half. And I do find 25 millimeter miniature, 25 28s, I find them to be more complicated or harder to paint than 15 millimeter. I have had arguments. I wouldn't say arguments because I never really argue about stuff like this. But I've had discussions, let's say that, because we've discussed whether it was easier to paint a 25 millimeter miniature as opposed to a 15 millimeter miniature. And I find that with bigger models, you get more detail. And so with the bigger model, some people say, well, you can see it easier. Well, that is true. But guess what you see? You see more. You see more details with the 28s than you would with a 15. So what does that mean? Well, that means you got to paint it because you can see it. You can't see it on a 15, so you don't have to paint it. So yeah, that's my point. But there are some new 15 millimeter models out there, some really highly detailed 15s that you can see it. That doesn't make it harder than the 25s. It makes it as hard. So in general, 15s are easier. And faster. I could have painted a whole brigade in 15s by now. Okay. Okay, so these Old Glory models that I'm painting right now, I don't think they're 28s. I think they're 25s. So the guys are just a little bit thinner, a little bit shorter than the front ranks or the Wargames Atlantic, because those are 28s. But did I mix some 28s with the 25s? I did, because I'm under the impression that nobody is created equal. Everybody has, some people are 6 feet, some people are 5 feet. So the Old Glory guys, they're shorter. They're on the short side. It doesn't mean they're out of scale. It just means the man that it represents is height challenged. Now I've got some American War of Independence Brunswick flags. And that's what I expect. Now those flags were GMB, but that's the size of the flag that I expect from flags of war for my Prussians. So that's how I judged the flagpole. But I went ahead on the 3 front rank command elements that have standard bearers. I went ahead and just used the entire pole, and I'll wait to cut the tip off until I get the flags in. But the Old Glory standard bearers, they're molded in, and they might not be long enough. I have considered cutting them out and drilling holes and then putting metal rods into their grips, but I decided against it. I did that a few times with my British and French for my Quatre Bras black powder, setup. I would drill drill the hand and then put a metal rod, a flagpole or a spear actually, and those worked out really well. It's just a lot of extra effort. It's unnecessary, really. Okay, so let's talk about a few other things. Um, Wargames Atlantic. They should be getting in a new shipment in their inventory pretty soon. I might do another order from them. Some World War II figures and maybe some Goblin Spiders or something. I've been thinking about, I don't know. Warlord. I've been holding off on doing a Warlord order because I still have a ton of Warlord models for sale, and I don't want to get models just to fill the shelves if I'm still sitting on a bunch of Warlord models. I noticed that they released the Dutch Belgians, or I should say just Belgians. I would have been super excited last year, and I probably would have ordered a ton of them for my Quatre Bras 28mm black powder collection. Instead, I had to go through Perry or Front Rank for my Dutch Belgians. But now that I personally have transitioned to 15mm for my Napoleonics, I'm not that excited about it. I'm excited about it for you as a customer that does 28mm. But again, I have so many Warlord models. I can't even count them on one hand. I've got so many. I probably have enough British to do all of Waterloo still in my inventory. So I have no desire to break the bank to go put in another Games Workshop. Games Workshop? No, wrong. Warlord Games order. I didn't realize there was this many gators. Oh my gosh, I'm going to probably have to mix up some more of this gray. Actually, I didn't mix up a lot because I wasn't sure what it was going to look like. And I didn't want to commit. My fantasy figures, I think I mentioned this last week. I've got a lot of those going up. A lot of them were put up last week after the show. A lot of them have sold. I'm pleasantly surprised at the amount of fantasy models that have sold. I also tried searching for fantasy models, and my collection is not like first or top of the list or anything. I had to dig deep to find my models. which is kind of alarming because I would type in almost exactly what I'm calling them, you know, like the actual listing, and it still wouldn't come up. That's a problem for me. It might be that these other sellers are paying a little extra for showcasing or whatever, you know, where you pay to make sure you're on the top of the list. And if they are doing that, well, that's good on them. But I'm going to have to adjust a little bit. So now I did find, okay, I've got this Bretonian archer. I actually have about a couple of dozen of them. Still on the sprue. No base, of course, but just these Bretonian archers still on the sprue. I got about 2 dozen of them from Games Workshop back when I had a store and I was hosting painting classes as like an outrider or a, what do they call it, a rogue trader store. We'd paint them, and I would show people how to paint them and get them up to game table quality, not museum quality. I don't claim to be the best painter in the world, but I can get you on the table and it'll look good. And so I have those in that box right over there. I was planning on getting them out and painting them up like a Bretonian unit, right? And then just selling them as a Bretonian unit. I noticed this guy, I don't know who it is, I didn't research it that deep, but there's this guy selling a single Bretonian figure, same exact figure that I have, fully painted, based, flocked, everything. A single figure. He's selling it for $50. That's right. 50. $50. Let that sink in. If it was me, if I had painted a single figure and put it on eBay, I would be selling it for about $5. Maybe $6, maybe even $9, depending on the model or how much detail I put into it or whatever. How hard it was to paint. I even have some champions that I'm selling for like $12. But $50. It's ridiculous. It is 100% ridiculous. Now, does the model look good? No. I looked at it and I'm like, okay, I can see what he did here. I can see with the technique that he used. And I can see that it is fully painted and it would look good on the table. it's not painted to my standards, or he did put a few extra, he did put a little extra effort into certain things that makes the overall model look okay. But in general, it's just an okay model. It's not $50. If he was charging $20, I would say, okay, that's about a, yeah, I would accept that. You know, a good solid paint job, $20. Okay, cool. But 50? And if he sells it, I'm just going to be like, what am I doing? I probably should watch that model just to see if it sells. Because I got 24 of them. And I could paint all 24 to that quality or better in 1 week. Easy. Because that's basically a battalion. And it's basically a medieval figure. It's not, it's just a medieval archer with a kettle helm. You know, nothing super fancy or anything. You know, used a lot of browns. As you should for a medieval archer. But if I did 1 week's of work, we'll call it 40 hours. If I put 40 hours into 24 models to that quality or even better, and I sold 24 single models at $50 a piece, what is that, $1,200? Yeah, that's $1,200 for a 40-hour work week. For some people, that's pennies. You know, all you rich people out there. But for me, that would be a lot of money. So I sell battalions of 24 figures for $120. What is that? $5 a model? Not $50 a model. Can you imagine if I took one of my Napoleonic units and I put just a little bit extra effort into them? You know, just not even a whole lot of extra effort, just basically covering up some blemishes. If I do that and charge $1,200, that's just ridiculous. That's just gouging. Or that tells me that that guy has no clue. Or maybe he has a better clue. Maybe he thinks or maybe he's delusional and thinks that he's a really good painter. And he's worth $50 a model. I don't think he is. Okay, enough of that. Enough of that. Okay, let's talk about my miniature rules. Marshals and Generals. Well, I didn't touch them at all in December. Zero. So I was working on, and still am, setting up a website. Um, the website is mainly going to be for like commission work on painting, but it's also going to be talking about Marshals and Generals. So it's going to be like a dual purpose website. That is still in its infancy, so it's not it's not ready for prime time. And the rules are they're not ready. They're really not ready for me to discuss because nothing has changed since the last time we discussed them. I think the last thing we talked about was command and control ranges, right? And the the two level command. You can only command units up to 2 levels below you. If it's 3 levels below you, you have no command over them at all. Um, so you have to go through a subordinate. So, like a corps commander can command a okay, hang on. A corps commander can command a division general and a brigade general, but not the battalions. But if you go one step lower, the division general can command his brigade commanders and the battalion units. And I consider the artillery, the cavalry, and the infantry fighting elements on the table to be battalion units. I know it's a squadron and a regiment and some of the and batteries, but I consider those to be combat units. So a division can command that, and brigade commanders, and then the brigade commanders can obviously command the units under their command, obviously. And if you get even bigger, like an army, or yeah, if you get an army, well, like let's say like Waterloo. You're playing all of Waterloo, and you've got Napoleon on the table. He can only command corps commanders, and then one step below a corps, divisions. So a division would be in command if they're within range of Napoleon or Wellington. But then I would also give like wing commanders like Ney or Orange. So, yeah, I would basically consider them like situational dictates, but like an army general. Um, yeah, so that's the Patton method. Patton always said know where your units are 3 levels below, but only issue orders. No, know where. Oh, wait. Know where your units are 2 levels below, but issue orders 1 level below, or something like that. But because this is a war game, you can't do that. You gotta. Oh, you could, I guess, but just make it too hard, too complicated, too. I don't. And one of the tenets, the main tenet of my rules is fast, fun, and playable. Because I would love to have a core on the table, because this is a core set of rules, and have that game over, start and finish, in less than one afternoon. Like maybe 4 to 5 hours. That's the idea. Now, where it breaks down, okay, movement, I pretty much got that straight. That's no problem. Uh-oh, I need to slow down here. Just made a little bit of a boo-boo. Okay, movement's fine. But where it breaks down is combat. And then results. I know pretty much how I want to roll the dice, and I know pretty much how I want the target numbers to be. We're going to be using D10s, and the target number that you're rolling to cause casualties is not based on your target, it's based on the shooter. So more experienced shooters will do more damage than less experienced shooters. Now, where it breaks down is how many hits will that cause, and how will that affect the target unit. And if I think I'm doing too many hits with a shot, I can always increase the target number to so that there'll be less hits. Or I can give units more hit points, if you want to call it that, where they can absorb more hits. Or vice versa, maybe there's not enough hits. And if that's the case, I'll just lower the target number. Or I'll lower the amount of hits you can take. So that's where the consternation is at. I'm basically still trying to evaluate the dice odds, the how many hits a unit can take, but I'm also kind of in a position where, do I want to have this type of an effect in the game? Is it beneficial to have this, or is it, like, as an example, disrupted, disordered, shaken, broken, routed, things like that. Do I think those type of results lend itself to a fast, fun, and playable game? Or am I shooting for realism? I would love to have realism that is also fast, fun, and playable. And that is where that's where I delay. I want to have limited effects on units that need to be removed, like shaken or disordered. And then maybe if you skip your turn, you stop being disordered. Or if you have a general in your area, he can roll a rally and then you get rid of disordered. Or you use one of your 2 movement actions to remove your disorder. Or something, right? Okay, now that you're disordered, what does that do to your unit in the game? Does it mean you can't move? Does it mean you can't shoot? Does it mean you have a penalty on shooting? Does it mean you have a reduced movement? I am leaning towards disordered, allowing it in some fashion. And I'm leaning towards it doesn't allow you to do anything. You can't move, you can't shoot, you can't do squat. But when it's your turn and your unit is activated, and for your battalion to be activated, it already implies, guarantees, 100%, that you are within the command range of a general, either brigade or company. Okay, so when that unit is activated, instead of doing nothing, like no shooting, no movement, the first thing that happens is it automatically rallies the disorder. So every activation allows you to do 2 things. Sometimes it's move twice. Sometimes it's move and shoot. Sometimes it's shoot twice. But with a disorder, your first of those 2 is to rally. So it doesn't really do anything to you. I mean, you get to either move once or shoot once. So it does something, but so it's a inconvenience. Now the question is, I have a million questions that I answer in my own head. But the next question is, that's what I should say. I should say the next question is, what benefit to the game, to the enjoyment of the players, comes from including a rule like that? Is it really necessary? Does a corps commander Remember, this is a core level game, so the player is the corps commander, not the battalion commander. Does the corps commander care if a battalion is disordered? I think not. But because it's a war game and the player is moving and rolling for battalions, he does have to know. But does he? Does he really? If I don't have that as a rule, then nobody has to worry about it. So the alternative is I shoot at you, I do hits of damage, you mark off the casualties off of your battalion, and then we move on. And then once those hits reach a certain number, which is to be determined, then your unit is destroyed. You notice how there was no routing, no disorder, none of that. Now I have considered an alternative, which is what I'm leaning towards, is a fallback. If you come under such withering fire that does a certain number of hits in one turn, instead of you becoming disordered, which has to be rallied, blah, 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 you instead fall back. You get pushed back. You basically, it's like a mini rout. You take some damage, you fall back out of range, and done. So on the following turn, on your turn, when you're activated, you just move back up and shoot or whatever. But I want the fallback to be more than your movement, because otherwise the disorder would have done exactly the same thing, right? So let's just say a unit has a 6-inch movement, and you fall back 6 inches, and you get, on your turn, you activate. Well, you take your first turn, you move forward 6 inches, and then you shoot. Where if you were disordered, you would just take your first action, not move, and shoot. So the exact same effect would happen. But if I make someone fall back, let's say 10 inches, which is what I'm thinking, on your turn you could advance 6 inches, and now you're maybe or maybe not able to shoot at your opponent. I'm thinking fallback is the way to go. Now, alternatively, I've also considered a fallback morale check. So if you take a certain amount of damage, you have to make a morale check, and this is based on the quality of the unit being shot. If they pass, they hold their ground. They take the hits and they shrug them off. But if they fail, they don't rout off the table. They just fall back. I'm doing everything in my power to avoid a rout rule where a unit falls back, routed, and then some mechanic allows for them to rally and return back to the fight. I think once a unit is routed, they are gone. So now remember, this is a core level game, not technically an army level game. Units that rout usually, honestly, don't come back till the next day. They don't go back halfway and have some general say, "Get your ass back into the fight." Now, American War of Independence, that might happen. Maybe. But usually when a unit is routing, they are all going in different directions. They are getting the hell out. It is over with. So units don't get destroyed, they get routed. So when a unit takes a number of hits equal to their rout number, whatever that is, they're technically destroyed. They're removed from the table. So up until that point, wait, did I grab the right one? Yeah. Okay, so up until that point, there's going to be a lot of pushback forward and backward and movement and losses and casualties, and then eventually the unit is going to say, okay, we've had enough, and then they'll be gone. I don't want to dwell to slow the game down on units getting routed, they fall back 24 inches, a general runs over there and rolls some dice, and now they're back into the fight, and then they got to move back up to the fight. Okay, I've played enough Napoleon's battles, and remember, that's more of an army level game. And I've read some personal accounts and stuff like that, and just put a little logic into it. A unit that routs, even if they're like well disciplined, but they realize that they're in a bad position and they need to get the hell out, they will fall back to a more defensible position, or maybe they'll fall back off the battlefield. But even if they fall back into a position where a general can approach them and rally them, now I'm talking about game terms now, not reality, but in games that I've played, they will fall back a huge distance. A general will have to go over there and rally them, which usually takes 2 or 3 turns on average. And then once they're rallied and they're put back into the fight, the next time they're hit, they're destroyed. So they don't really, the player doesn't really benefit from rallying. I mean, he does a little bit, but it takes so much time and effort from the player to organize his generals in a way that they can run back and rally, and then, yeah, it's more of a headache than a benefit. So I'm going to take that whole aspect of the game out. I'm going to have fallbacks, which is kind of like a route. It's a mini route. And then I'll have, you don't have to worry about rallying them, because over the course of the turn, you can assume that the generals are rallying them. The players don't have to roll for it. You could just assume it's happening. And then they get to come back on the next turn. But once they've hit so many hits that they just can't absorb that much damage, they're just gone. They just give up and flee. Now I'm not sure if that's a boot or if that's a gator. It could be, yeah, it's a gator. Yeah, this is the guy that didn't have his boots painted. I know there are some players out there that love the minutia. You know, they want to know how many bullets every guy's carrying, and they want to know if he brought enough rations to eat for the day, and wants to know how heavy his pack is, because that might slow his movement down. And no, that's not what this game's about. This is not a man-to-man game. This is a core level game. Does the core commander care about that? No. And if he does, he doesn't need to be a core commander. Okay, damn, that one's done already. There was no gators. So that's where I'm at with the rules. I don't know about how many hits I want a unit to take. I don't know if I want to have them fall back. Melee is going to be more deadly than shooting. I think I still want to have fallback. Yeah, I think I'm still going to do the fallback destroy. I want to have a universal game mechanic that's not different for each aspect of the game. I don't want melee to be so different from shooting that the rules conflict or they don't blend together. Yeah, so yeah, there's going to be a melee number of dice. There's going to be a shooting number of dice. And the dice are pretty much going to be the same or easily worked out, like how many dice you get to roll. Because it's a number of dice based on how many. It's the primary determining factor of how many dice you roll is how big the unit is. The bigger the unit, the more dice you get. There will be some other modifiers to the number of dice you get to roll, but that's generally the gist. And then when you get into combat, if you're shooting, you have a target number based on your training, your skill, your quality, if you will. And then if you get into melee, same thing. You're going to have a target number based on the quality or skill. Now, shooting number of dice is modified usually by cover. So cover doesn't apply a modifier to the die roll, it applies a modifier to the number of dice. And so that'll be easy math because you'll just be rolling, going for a target number. There won't be any modifiers, right? It'll just mean you can only have 3 dice instead of 4 or whatever. But in melee, I'm trying to figure out how I want to modify it. I kind of want to do it the same way. Difference in quality might be a die modifier, like more or less dice, because I think that a higher skill unit in melee will take less casualties because of their ability to fight. You know, like maybe grenadiers get a bonus. But the bonus is not a die roll modifier, it's a number of dice roll modifier. You're still shooting for your own target number, you just get less dice. That's the plan. And then if you take a number of casualties, you make a morale to determine if you fall back. Or if you remain engaged. But the big question is, how many hits for each of those categories because if you give a unit a bunch of hits, let's say I give a unit just like, let's just say your regular old French line battalion, let's say I give them 3 hits. And if they take 1 hit, I'm shooting low. Let's say I say if they take 1 hit, they have to roll to see if they fall back. I roll dice, and I almost always get 3 hits. Well, obviously, either the how many hits I'm issuing is too high, or the number of hits you can take is too low. Because I don't want every shot to kill every time. Obviously. Because then there would be no reason to engage because you know you're going to die. So maybe 6 hits. And maybe 3 is a fallback number. And maybe you do 3 hits every time you shoot. Well, that means the odds of you causing them to fall back every turn is guaranteed. I don't like that either. Now I understand there's dice and you might have a bad roll, you might have a good roll. I get that. I would just have to factor that into my evaluation of how many hits I want units to be able to take. And then out of game, out of how do I word this? Game design. Here we go. If I say 6 hits causes a rout or whatever, not a rout I don't care about, but like just casualties, how do you mark that? How do you display that on the table? A D6 behind a unit works really well, or casualty caps works really well. But what if I want it to be more than 6? What if I want it to be 8 or 12 or 24? Do I mark every figure with a casualty? Do I put 24 beads behind the unit? That would just get cluttered. So the number I'm choosing for the route is also in the back of my mind. What is the table going to look like with these numbers? I probably shouldn't think about something like that. I should go strictly by just numbers. But half of the reason why you play miniature games is because of the look of the table. Otherwise, you would just play a computer game or a board game. So I have been kind of thinking of a base 12. Going up and down from 12 for a complete destruction of a unit. If you're more elite, maybe you can take more than 12. If you're less elite, maybe you take less than 12. I was thinking like a regular unit would be 12. Now, I got that number from the destruction number in Napoleon's battles. It might have been 10 is the base French. Elite units might have been 12. But their route numbers were usually 5 or 6. But those routes, it's not I've taken 5 or 6 hits throughout the game. It's I've taken 5 or 6 hits in one attack. So I'm thinking, and that's basically half of your destruction number. So that's kind of what I'm thinking. The pushback will be half of whatever their destruction number is. But that has to be done in one turn. So if my destruction number is 10 and my pushback is 5, and I have 4 hits on me, and you do 5 damage, I would be pushed back but not destroyed, because I would only be at 9 damage. Now there is a mechanic in Warriors of Napoleon, or Soldiers of Napoleon, that I love, and I've got to figure out a way to get it integrated into my game. But they have a hit resistance number where it's a morale thing. Okay, well, nope, that's a gator. If you do 6 hits to me, I can roll my hit resistance number, which is basically a morale check. If I succeed, I get to reduce that damage by 1. I kind of like that. Is it necessary? I don't think so. I think it's just one additional die roll that's really not necessary. Because, but then again, maybe it helps because a veteran unit would be more resistant to casualties causing fallbacks or destruction. It kind of gives, it's kind of like a morale check modifier by reducing the damage. I don't know if that makes sense. Plus, it gives the player the illusion that he's actually got a stronger unit than he really does. He's like, oh yeah, my guard, they can take the hits. Right. But it does give them a little bit of a chance. So, but my question is, remember, these questions are to myself. Does it impact the game? Does it slow the game down? And is it necessary? Do I need to worry about that? Or should I just apply hits and let it go? Because you're already rolling for damage. The die roll, if I roll a 1, obviously I didn't cause enough casualties to my opponent's unit, the guard or the landbeer or whoever, to cause them to freak out and break. The die roll already determines the impact of my shooting action or melee action. It's already worked into the die roll. But that implies that there's going to be a modifier on how many dice I'm rolling or what the target number is based on the target's quality. And I don't have that modifier in. That's not a modifier. So I think allowing them a save to remove one hit is enough of a advantage, a bump, a tweak for shooting at a more experienced unit or melee. And let's say 6, or let's say 5. 5 is the fallback number, and you shoot them and you do 5, and then they roll their morale and they reduce it down to 4. Now they don't have to fall back. Yeah, so that's kind of where I'm at with that. I pretty much know how I want to do shooting. I just need to work out the actual final numbers. Like, what are the target numbers? What are the hit points of the units? What are the results of taking so many hits? There's not going to be any route. Well, there is a route, but it basically is permanent. Pick the unit up, they route. They route off the table. They route back to the Army's rest and recuperation area so that they can come back in the fight the next day. So effectively, they're out of the game. There will be fallback and not a pin, not a disorder or a disruption or nothing like that. So there's no need, this is part of it as well, there's no need to mark a unit with a route or a disorder, because those don't exist. There is pushback, but that's just moving your models to a different position on the table. What does that do to you? Nothing. It just moves you. Moves you off of a point. I want the fallback number to be fairly high. I don't want the game to be one army pushing the other army around. I want units to be able to stand there under withering fire and actually be able to take more damage. But even if you do reach the fallback number, it doesn't mean it's automatic. You don't just automatically fall back. You get a morale check to resist falling back. Cavalry, that's a totally different story. Cavalry cannot remain in contact from turn to turn. Infantry can, but cavalry cannot. So, or will not in this game. So, if they win and cavalry is going to be melee, pretty much melee only. I understand that there are some cavalry with carbines and stuff, and they can shoot, but that's not where we're at, because that's just shooting. But in melee, when a cavalry unit charges another unit, they either win the melee or they don't. And if they force their opponent to fall back, they themselves get a morale check to see if they can press forward and continue with the fight. If they but that's if they win. There's basically I need to make a flow chart almost. It's easy to understand, but to explain it for the first time to somebody, I would need like a table so that they can grasp it. But once you got it, it's going to be easy. Cavalry can never remain in contact at the end of a melee round. Someone has to fall back. If you win, you force a fallback roll on your opponent. If they fail to fall back, then you have to fall back, period. You failed to knock them off their perch. But if they do fall back, now you don't have to fall back. What you do is make a morale check to see if you continue with, we'll call it an experience test. If you make an experience test, you can, and you pass, then you can continue on with your breakthrough and re-engage the unit if you want, causing a whole nother round of combat. Or you can go attack someone new. Basically whatever. But if you fail your recall test, then or breakthrough test or whatever I want to call it, then you just stand there. If your opponent passes and doesn't fall back, then you don't have to roll, you just automatically fall back. All right, that's where we're going to call this video today, guys. Thank you for coming out and listening to me rant and talk about the Prussians early on and my painting dilemma, uniform dilemma that I finally worked out. I strongly recommend this book, The Uniforms of Waterloo by Philip Haythornthwaite. Okay, where'd my focus go? Philip Haythornthwaite. This is probably my best resource, but don't live with just one resource. Make sure you look around at other people, read a lot of different documentation, and come to your own conclusions. And that's what I had to do. And yeah, so 15 millimeter has kind of been put off to the side for a minute, because I've been doing a lot of miniatures for the store. I've been doing a lot of fantasy, a ton of fantasy, and I'm doing these. Finished up some commissions, waiting for some of those to get resolved before I start any more commissions. And then, and my prices. If you might have noticed, some prices have changed up and down on my eBay store. Mostly down, but some of them went up. shipping changed and things like that. So there was a little bit of a change, but not much. I mean, you wouldn't even notice it unless you're always on there. And that's basically it. All right, guys. I'll catch you next week at some point. Remember to like and subscribe, and be sure to hit the notification icon because it might not be Wednesday that I go live next week. All right. I'll catch you next time.